and welcome to the Government Transformation Show, the podcast for public sector changemakers. This week, my guests are Tim Williams and Pete Lydon from Actian, who are joining to chat about accelerating decision-making. We explore what the building blocks to quicker, better decision-making is, what do governments need to do, how they can rethink their approach, what kind of technology do they need to use, what cultural changes do they need to make. Tim and Pete unpick some of these topics, drawing on multiple examples of how to do this effectively. There's loads to get into, so let's jump into that conversation right now. Thank you both for joining me today for this conversation. How are you both doing?
Yeah, great.
Very well. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. So we're going to explore the topic of accelerating decision-making today, which, while I think is something all civil servants want to achieve, establishing the building blocks that allows us to do that are not always as clear as they need to be. So really looking forward to unpacking this all with you both today. But first, as ever, let's start with some intros. So Tim, I'll come to you first. If you could give me a bit of a background and kind of talk about what your role is at Actian.
Yeah, perfect. So my name's Tim Williams. I'm one of the enterprise sales directors here at Actian. I've been at the organisation for about 18 months, but I've spent the best part of the last decade working in the data management space, both on the services side, so consulting, and in software. Most of that period has been spent working with the public sector. So I've seen all sorts of challenges, all sorts of issues that have needed to be sorted. And, as we've seen, those challenges just keep on coming as the technology changes. So, I'm looking forward to having the conversation. So I think it's an important topic that we're discussing.
Great. And Pete, where are you coming from things?
I've been sort of enterprise space, IT-wise, so I'm technical, I'm a director of sales engineering. I've been in IT since the late 90s, finance before that, we're in banking, really working with the public and private sector, mainly across Europe, and now more recently I do cover sort of half the globe, so I cover the EMEA region, I cover the APAC region as well.
Awesome. Well, great to have you both. So before we kind of delve into this topic, I think it's really important to set the scene a little bit. So why are we talking about accelerating decision making today? Why is this a focus area for Actian, and why does it need to be an important conversation for government too?
I think ultimately the world has changed an awful lot from when back in the day, a lot of the things that were happening in public sector, the services that were being provided by the public sector was all very manual. If you wanted to find anything out from your local council, you might need to fill in a form, you might need to go to their offices and force councils to be able, or local government to be able to make decisions. A lot needed to happen to enable that. I think now citizens are definitely demanding more. They want to be able to interact with services from their government online. They want easier ways to do that. And I think ultimately you need the right information in place to be able to provide those services. So getting to answers quicker to solve complex problems is definitely needed. So that's sort of why we're really keen to help organisations to make that process a lot more automated, a lot easier, and a lot more trusted, because you need good trusted information to make good decisions.
So how is Actian working with the public sector in this space?
So we help in a number of different ways. We as an organisation have been around for 50 years, and our first go into the market was database technology. So we support the Ingress database technology that's been around and supporting applications ever since its inception in the 70s. More recently, helping large government departments, local councils with integration of data, and also the ability to analyse that with market-leading data warehousing technology.
Absolutely. And Actian led a discussion table on this topic at our summit at the end of last year. Keen to hear from you both, I guess, what were the top headlines looking back at those conversations with government departments? So what were the key takeaways that really stuck with you in terms of where and how government are harnessing the power of accelerated decision making?
Pete, do you want to start with that one? I think
I can do. Yeah, there was interesting topics. One that sort of like that was quite personal to me was we were talking about the aerated concrete issues that affected schools, and actually my old primary school that maybe you don't believe is still around, what was affected by this, and this was around that there was two data sources that they were taking data from, and there was a mismatch in the data. They had a different amount of records in one system to another, and then ultimately trying to join that data was difficult, and then give ministers that information in a timely fashion, because it was a very hot topic, that this came about, that the department was sort of struggling with it, and ultimately things were breaking because of that. So it's really all about making sure that whatever your data source is, even if it's a small amount of data that you're working with, is that you can rely on it, that it's enterprise class, and then when you need it, you can trust in it and rely on it. So that was a really sort of big one there initially for me.
Yeah, I think alongside that, it's good to see a lot of the conversations we had, everyone had the understanding that there is value inherently held within the data. There is so much of it, there is so much they can glean from it, but ultimately the infrastructure isn't necessarily there to support them in realizing that value. There's a lot of manual intervention needed. There's difficulty sharing information across silos. There's lots of parts of the councils or central government that need to work together but find it difficult because where's the data? Who's got the right data? Who owns it? So I think that was a key thing that came up. Also the lack of data literacy across the organisations as well. So there's lots of good things happening within public sector. There's lots of pockets of really great practice and really interesting uses of information, but actually there's less understanding at perhaps the front lines of the public sector as to what happens to the data once it's been entered. What is the impact of poor data quality as you go downstream? I think there's a lot of good work going on to rectify that, but that key issue of, why should we care about data is still quite prevalent, I thought, from the conversations that we had.
Yeah. So, I mean, lots of interesting points raised there, lots of questions. So keen to kind of get into the nitty gritty, I guess, of this. So kind of leading on from what you were saying, Tim, what's really preventing government from unlocking quicker, faster decision making? Where are those stumbling blocks? Kind of what's slowing them down? Could we explore that a bit more?
Yeah, sure. Ultimately, there's a lot of technical debt within local authorities, within central government, within government agencies. There's a lot of applications and systems that have been around for ages. There'll be legacy historic applications that it's difficult to get information from. Those systems will probably be held within silos within the organisation, and sometimes they can be a bit black box as well. What happens if we turn them off? How could we migrate that to more modern hardware or more modern applications? So the fact that there is all of this technical debt there, and ultimately everyone's being expected to do more with less, it can be difficult to know where to start with a lot of these practices and getting better at making that information more available. Pete, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would do. Really, there is like this whole thing of there is so much data and so much requirements. Is the business units, the IT, the business owners are sort of struggling where to start. Or not even knowing where to start in their journey of sort of like accelerating data and making those decisions. There's lots of things as well about. It was interesting tracks are talking about AI, and going down that route and trying to see how AI could help them. And everyone's scrabbling around at the moment to spend money on AI to work out how much money that they need to spend on AI. And really, that won't be the panacea for helping with accelerated decision making. There's, it's all about, understanding and planning what their requirements are and trying to build something towards that, and whether that be in the cloud, in the G cloud, or that's going to be in a data center, so it's more on premise where they're storing the data. That's a decision down to the business ultimately, but they need to make sure that they can get the best value of wherever they put that data, make sure they can put optimized systems on that, and then make sure that they're flexible enough that they build them that as new requirements come along that they can reuse those datas, whether it be siloed or they've managed to sort of merge that together into some sort of data lake that they can get better information and answers from of it.
So what advice, I guess, would you give to government departments on this? Where do you see kind of the practical action points to create better decision making, and where should governments be placing their priorities?
It's a good one. I mean, really, a lot of it is around start of it is keep the idea of what they want to do simple. Keep trying to sort of pare it back on what they're doing, because it's too big to have a huge project. It's great to sort of think big, but to start small on that. Big projects and trying to tackle these big issues, they're the ones that are nearly guaranteed to fail. To do that. We've helped a number of organisations over the years, and if I can think of one, it would be more Irish Revenue Commissioner. So they're they're the same as the HMRC, tax collection systems and stuff like that. And they had a standard practice way of working, and how they would do their decisions was by, like they'd have a report, it would run in the morning, that would take an hour to run or so. They would have a meeting in the afternoon based on that. And so their life and their work revolved around IT versus trying to get more out of IT, the systems, to make sure it's more flexible for them. And we implemented one of our analytics solutions within there. And normally the job takes about an hour to run. Guy working with it, he sort of said, well, I'm going to test this system. I'm going to let it run at lunchtime. I'm going to come back after lunch and look at the numbers. And he started running it, and under a minute later, he got his results back. And now he had to go back to the original system and say, well, I'm going to run it on there now and compare it. And he sat round for an hour looking to make sure that the numbers were the same. So, there are tools out there that can sort of help, that acceleration. And now the fact that you've got something in there that you can get what was taking an hour down to under a minute, you can react better as a business. You can go ahead and you can do more. You can sort of say, well, what happens if we can have that meeting in the morning, mull and making a decision, knowing that things are going to change. Don't be sort of caught up in that it's daily batch processing or a week. You want to be more on demand, that you own the data and you own the processes that get you to the answers of that data faster. And then from that, you can use that data in a better fashion. You can spend more time making a better decision. Sometimes that's the best way around it. Get the answer quicker, and you've got more time to think about the practicalities of what you're going to do with that information.
I think to add on to that as well, Pete, you've always got to ask, what is the why? It's a saying that's used a lot, but you have to understand why you want to, integrate lots of different data sources into a single place. You've got to know what questions you need answering. Sometimes things come up where you didn't know that was a question that needed asking. But if you've got the underlying infrastructure in place to support adding more information that you need into a more centralized platform to be able to democratize data, as Pete was alluding to there, it is going to help. It is going to help with those decisions. I think one of the things that I've said to customers over the years is ultimately you need to have a roadmap. If you want to get to that position where you've got data available to make better decisions, you've got to understand what you need to do to get there. Where are you at the moment? What's the target state? How do we get there? But ultimately, just having a big strategic roadmap is one thing. You need to ensure that there's buy-in across the business to support that. So what make sure you've got some roadside attractions on your roadmap. What are the things that are going to add value to the business throughout this process? Because ultimately, getting to that single source of truth or single point of access for information is going to take a long time if you're going to do it across the whole organization. So what problems can you solve immediately that's going to add value, get people more excited about the journey, and ultimately deliver more value to not just the internal business, but your citizens and residents as well?
And I mean, yes, so you mentioned those sort of government do have the kind of few great tools at their disposal with regards to this, one being a big one being the role of data in driving those kind of quicker decision making and using data more efficiently. Keen to understand how government departments can increase data availability, visibility and accessibility within, but also I guess between different government departments.
I think the obvious one is leveraging newer technologies. There is so much out there now that enables easier access to information. In times gone by, you might have needed a 4-year project to implement one piece of technology that might get some information from a couple of different places into another application, maybe. But now with the power of the cloud, you can make data more available on demand. You can build pipelines out, not just from other cloud solutions, but also from those legacy applications that we mentioned earlier. Perhaps the spreadsheets that I'm sure are everywhere within most public sector organizations, integrating all of that together and enabling sharing of data where appropriate. Ultimately, we've got to remember that some areas of the public sector are not going to or shouldn't be allowed to see certain other areas of the public sector's information. So, for example, waste management services at a council probably shouldn't see social care information. That needs to be accessed by the right people. So leveraging those newer technologies, those newer techniques, that agile development style of let's start small, let's solve a tactical problem, but have a holistic strategic view in mind, that's going to get you more data. It's going to get more visibility, and that accessibility with different departments is then going to become easier.
Yeah, Pete, did you want to jump in with that at all?
Yeah, I mean, again, with sort of like, the availability and the visibility and accessibility, as you were sort of saying, between departments, you've got to make sure that the data that's going around is, quality of data of what's happening. Make sure that the data that you're sharing is good, and importantly, it's very relevant. As Tim was saying there, you've got to make sure that you've got the correct sort of governance in place. Like that, that you've got a good strategy, and it's all about making sure that enables you to be able to go share data correctly. It isn't just about policing. Okay, it's why have you got it? What is it going to be used for? Making sure that that you have got the ability to go and share that data, but also there's going to be areas where it's going to be restricted. And again, you've got things around data sensitivity. So you've got to have that hybrid approach that, cloud might not be the right place, and that data is going to be on premise because it's got to be on certain secure systems. And you've got to manage all that. And again, that's an important thing. But you can build pipelines around that data to make sure that the appropriate data is getting shared, or if you need to go and obfuscate certain parts of that data, that you can go ahead and do that as well.
Yeah, just sort of as a supplementary point to that, Pete was saying there about understanding why you've got data, what it's used for. Technology is a huge part of assisting with the availability and visibility of data, but also the governance of it, the understanding of not just where things are and why it's there, but also who owns it. Because ultimately, yes, it's great to have everything centralized, but still there should be restrictions on who can access what. So having a strong data governance function that supports any technology investment is incredibly important.
And I guess there's a data literacy point too, which Tim, you mentioned at the start of this conversation. How do we encourage and empower non-data roles to really leverage those kind of real-time insights and act without delay? And I guess curious to know if you kind of heard of any interesting strategies that different government departments have kind of taken with regards to kind of boosting their skills within their workforce around that data point.
Well, I think we're at a point now where data in terms of AI is everywhere. Everyone's really excited about AI, and I think that has encouraged a lot more people who perhaps didn't really know much about data to start thinking about it. But some of the things that I've seen work before is simple things like lunch and learns. Sometimes you don't want people to think, oh, it's data, it's IT, it's just a byproduct of what we do on the front lines. It's actually just bridging that gap between business and IT and saying, hey, look, this stuff is important. And to do that, not just saying, here is some data, what do we do with it? It's telling stories about how data impacts people, because it does. On a day-to-day basis, there are lots of different contact points within public sector and their citizens, or the people that they provide services to, and really seeing how a data entry problem can cause issues to them is powerful. So a great example might be within social housing, where a frontline worker may send a repairs person to a job after it's been reported by one of their residents, but that data has been entered wrong. The repair person turns up with the wrong tools for the job or the wrong parts. You then have a very frustrated resident that you've got to deal with. It doesn't look good for you. And then also you've spent carbon emissions getting to that job. You've also wasted the repair operative's time, so you've lost efficiency. And so that is a really powerful way of bringing to life what happens just with perhaps the wrong click of a button or the wrong box being filled in. So those data storytelling sessions and those lunch and learns or workshops can really help bring to life why it's so important for non-data people to care.
Yeah, so bringing it back around to lived experiences and kind of, it is a personal thing. It's not just data thing that's happening that we all heard of before. Really interesting. Pete, was there anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I suppose there's two things. You can almost talk about the data literacy piece of why there are different systems as well, so people can understand. Where Tim sort of talked about, you've got like a contact center where people are, calling a local authority to sort of say they've got a problem with a blocked drain or something like that. And you've got lots of these records that go in. That would be in one system. Then you've got to sort of think about the operation side or the management of that, where you've got sort of reporting systems or analytic systems that are looking at trying to get different information out of that data. and sort of like storytelling around that and explaining, the reasons why there's a different system. We could look at things and find out actually we seem to be having a problem and being a bit more predictive about there could be a bigger issue here where, if we've got sort of, I don't know, a plumbing issue in a certain housing estate, and we have 6 or 8 or 10 houses all have this issue in a short period of time, is it going to be systemic of that whole housing estate? And if you've got other systems that are able to look at the data at a different angle to come in and see that, maybe you can start thinking, actually, if we get on top of this and we start doing a wholesale change into that area, it can be more efficient to get that works planned and stuff like that. And really, that sort of leads into then that you have data experts around that to help that. They understand, sometimes the business users or those users don't realize how important that they are of being these sort of data smiths, if you like, with the data. So, they're the people that will like go, well, I know what this means in the context of my business. And actually, from what this report is showing me, or if I can ask this question of the data, I can sort of say, well, if we do this work now, it's going to save us doing a far bigger job down the line, in 6 months or a year's time, where it's going to cost far much money, or we can start budgeting for that operations now, and we can do that. So it's really about, encouraging people to sort of, understand what the data means in the real world context, and as well as giving them insight of how these systems all hang together, I think, on the other side as well.
So sorry, Sam, I was just finally on that. Yes, you need to have the context, but also back to what I was saying a moment ago around data governance. To really empower people, you need to know that you've got good security in place. Your data is somewhere where it can only be accessed by the right people. You're not using spreadsheets found in a file on SharePoint somewhere. There is clear direction as to where you can find information, and then be encouraged to use it because you know that it's clean and that it's trusted. Mm-hmm. So I think having those real key understandings of who owns what, why is it there, what do we need it for, will give people confidence that they're not going to make a misstep, and then potentially expose the council to any risk, or the government to any risk.
Yeah, and I guess that's the key word there, sort of trusted, isn't it? But we've looked at the kind of positive aspects of accelerated decision making, but keen to talk a bit about how do we balance those benefits with the risk of change, and how can government departments really manage that effectively?
I think firstly, you need to weigh up the risk of change versus doing nothing.
Yeah.
If it's a case of, well, things aren't working at the moment, we're not getting the right results, we are making decisions based on data that's a week old, what is the impact of that? What might happen if that data is wrong? Whereas if we change, yes, there is pain to change, there always is, but ultimately further down the line, if you know that you're going to be able to make decisions easier and with more confidence, then that's surely better than doing nothing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, you've got the thing of not changing, there's inherent risk in that as well. You've got the way that, technical debt can be built up. You've got the risk of IT systems failing. You've got the risk of, security risks, even around, where you're not patching for security vulnerabilities and all that sort of side of IT that I get interested in. Like that as well, and again, really it's about, sticking and remembering the basics, make sure you've got the plan, and you've got a way of keep sort of going forwards, and then checking in that you've got a project that's going bad. Have you got checkpoints in place? Are you doing reviews on that? And also, if it's a longer term project, is it still meeting the goals of A, what the project was setting out to do, and B, is that still valid? Okay. It's a lot around the whys on there as well.
Yeah, I think being open to change is important. A lot of people, I think we're all guilty of being creatures of habit as human beings. We don't like change, really. We like things to stay the same. It's worked forever. Why should we do it? But obviously within the marketplace and within the industry, things change all the time. There's always a new shiny thing that's come out. AI is it at the moment, and there's lots of people that want to reap the benefits. But the danger is making changes to implement some of these newer technologies and newer ideas without first having the foundations in place. You know, there is an inherent risk of running too fast and doing the really exciting things before you've actually got your house in order. So I think it's really important that, yes, you need to weigh the risk of doing nothing versus change, but also don't try and change everything too quickly. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah. Equally, kind of don't always chase the bright, shiny new toys that are coming out before you, as you say, you have your house in order. Pete and Tim, we've talked a lot about a lot of different things: data availability, data visibility, data literacy, kind of balancing the risks of not doing enough with doing too much. But keen to get your thoughts on, I guess, what if there was the one thing you wanted kind of listeners to take away from this conversation, what would that kind of piece be?
I think from my perspective, everything costs in some way, whether that's change, new systems, new people, new processes, that costs money, but also so does staying the same. You know, you need to do everything you can to understand what the benefits are, what the risks are. But ultimately, if you want to make better decisions, you need good data to do that. And you need the infrastructure to support the provision of that information to enable you to interrogate it, understand it, and ultimately make decisions from it better. On the same side of that, make sure that you set goals that are achievable. Yes, we'd all love nirvana, and we'd all love it to happen now, but ultimately you need to have goals in place that can scale with your business. It's all very well saying we need to be net zero by yesterday. Well, great, but you need to understand what it takes to get there, put the processes, the people, the systems in place to start helping you make that change. And as Pete said a moment ago, just keep checking that you're on the right track, keep having, you know, meetings around what's important, is it still important, how are we going, and you know, don't get caught in the sunk cost fallacy of, well, we've got this far, we might as well just carry on.
Great. And Pete, any lasting thoughts or final piece of advice to leave our listeners with?
Well, I thought Tim did a very good job there with that, really. But you know, really, you know, looking at it, if you want to accelerate decision making and you want to get more from your data, and you want to go ahead and you know, do better data sharing and stuff like that, well, you have to do something. You know, so you have to sort of think and look at it. You know, what is the cost of doing nothing? You know, like that, and you know, why is that better? You know, like that. You've got to. I think there's got to be, you know, better collaboration. There's got to be those discussions that, you know, about, you know, cross-departmental, you know, in government, of, you know, where they've got, I'm sure, very, you know, rich, you know, historical amounts of data that could really help other departments, you know, like that. And there needs to be that sort of like that cross-functional piece where they are speaking and working together and doing better collaboration, and really sort of speaking on their experiences and sharing those, you know, what were their wins and what were their mistakes, you know, like that. I think that's important as well, like that, because otherwise, you know, Department A could have an issue that they failed on, and if they told that whilst they were doing the project to Department B, you know, it gives them the opportunity to succeed and, you know, maybe get over hurdles that they were going to hit.
Yeah, I think finally, Pete said it earlier on, but I really do think it's worth emphasis that think big, start small, make it achievable.
I like that. Great note, great easy note to end on. But unfortunately, we have come up against time. But looking forward to kind of continuing to watch the developments in this space and kind of how Actian is helping government along on this journey. And all that's left to say is thank you both very much for coming on the show.
Thanks
for having us.
Thank you.